Hi, everyone, and welcome to episode 2 of Behind the Wheel in partnership with Mode Push. And oh boy, do I have an episode for you. Today's guest is Joseph Loake. Joseph is a driver and current championship leader in British Formula 3. He's driven Formula 4, Fiesta Series, and of course, karting. Today, Joseph joined me to talk about his career, racing against other young talents, and his love for sim racing. I hope you enjoy our conversation. Hello, Joseph. Welcome to the show. You have 3 races now under your belt in British Formula 3. Do you have your feet under the table now, or is it still a little bit different?
It's definitely still getting used to it a little bit. It's still definitely not natural the way I have to drive this car, but especially from coming from F4 where the car was very very different. But yeah, I think we can safely say that the pace is really strong, and I know how to drive this car. It's just the consistency is still coming a little bit, but luckily in this championship you don't really need consistency if you're already P1. So yeah, okay, it's something that I need to work on definitely.
Yeah, and obviously you've driven a lot of cars through your career right now. But I want to start at the very beginning where almost all motorsport careers start in karting. You started in the Natska series in 2016, I believe.
Yeah, that's
Um,
right. It was definitely a very low level championship. It was something that I didn't really do too much in terms of putting a lot of effort into it. It was more just a bit of fun. And then yeah, I was told by a few people that I was quite good, especially compared to the people around me, because obviously it's quite a low level championship. So I tried a couple of higher up categories in karting, but didn't really see any point in spending all sorts of money in what we thought was just a chassis and some wheels with an engine bolted on. So we decided to go into cars instead. Um, so yeah, just didn't. Karting was kind of just a bit of fun for me, and then things started to get real when I moved to cars.
hmm. And with karts, was that in 2016? Was that your first time you ever raced in karts, or did you like before that? Did you maybe go to a karting track with friends, or was that your first time?
Um, I always, I reckon it was probably from about 2013, 2014. I always would go every other Sunday with my dad to a rental go karting place. It was only a small little track, but I just had so much fun with it. Then my high school had a karting club associated with it, so we decided to go and join that, and that's kind of where it all started.
And in obviously in your first season, you actually ended up winning the championship in Natska, and then you moved to senior Natska then the following year. Was that a like massive step up, or was that kind of the same?
Well, it was the highest up class in the championship, so it was definitely very tricky to obviously get used to racing such quick karts against some drivers that are pretty decent. There's a couple that have moved on to pretty decent levels of karting and stuff. But obviously, with that championship, nobody really has the sort of money that you need to be able to progress um, to progress further. I'm very lucky that obviously we were able to get into Fiesta Juniors when I was only 14, and then things just kind of followed after that. So um, but yeah, it was definitely tricky to get used to a new machine. But at the end of the day, that's what it is. Every time you move up to the next stage of your career.
Yeah. And like he just said, you moved in 2019 to the Fiesta Junior Cup. How was that transition from karts to cars?
Um, it was definitely tricky because obviously the Fiesta was a front wheel drive, uh, full car. So you had to start thinking about how much the body was rolling while you were turning. Thinking about all sorts of weight distribution, things like that. So it was very tricky to get used to that because that's something that you don't think about in karting. But once I'd got the hang of it, I was quite quick. It just took me a while, and obviously in Fiesta Junior you don't get much testing or anything like that. So I think I only had 3-4 days in the car before I started my season off, which was actually at round 2 because I wasn't old enough for round 1. So, but yeah, we started off with a podium, and yeah, it was quite a good season overall, that one. Obviously finishing second in the championship. So yeah, it wasn't bad.
Yeah, and I've always actually wanted to ask this because I don't know exactly what the like driving stuff is in the UK, but in the US, I'm pretty sure you're not allowed to drive like cars at 14. So did you have your maybe like a learner's permit or something like that beforehand, or was that basically your first time in driving a car?
Well, I didn't drive on the road, that's for sure. I didn't pass my driving test till I was, uh, I think it was about August last year, which obviously is quite funny to say when obviously I've done a full 1 year and a half of Formula 4 in the UK. I'm driving at 150 mile an hour, but I'm not allowed to drive a road car at 30. So, um, yeah, it was quite funny. I did laugh with a few people at that, but yeah. So obviously I'd be taken to all the tracks by my mum. We'd just go around to each track, just turning up, having a good time, really. And that's kind of what I've always tried to do. I've always tried to keep the fun in things, and I feel that's when the results follow.
Mhm. And in your first season in the Fiesta Junior Cup, obviously you finished second place with I think you won twice at Anglesey, I believe, if I'm not saying that incorrectly.
Yeah, yeah,
How was it to find that basically immediate success in your first time in cars?
yeah. It was pretty cool. Obviously, it's not the highest championship I've ever done, but it was my first time driving a race car, and that was what I was trying to get used to, and that's what the championship's so good for. So, it was definitely a big learning curve. Um, but I think the results show that it was quite a natural progression in the end from karting to cars, and that was why we obviously got the results. So yeah, we obviously just slowly found pace throughout the year and ended up at the front of the grid by the end. So yeah, it was good.
Was it easy to find pace in that car, or was it a very like tricky thing to finally get in the groove with it?
I always found with that car that it was very easy to put an okay lap in, but it was very hard to find the extra 2-3 tenths that you needed to be P1. And I always found that even from track to track that I'd maybe like Anglesey, I'd get it right and I'd just find the extra time, and then some tracks I'd maybe struggle and not quite have the pace, and that's where I think it's very tricky with that car, and it teaches you to be very very precise and teaches you to try and optimize everything that you do, because every bit of time that you lose in that car is almost tripled compared to a single seater. So it just teaches you to not make mistakes and try and be as perfect as possible.
And obviously, the next year you stayed in the Fiesta Cup, but then you won every single race in the season and took the title. And then you were obviously nominated for Teen Racer of the Year that year. How obviously you found success the previous year, but then to jump from that to winning every single race, how'd that feel?
Yeah, it was good. Obviously, it was my second year in the championship, and the majority of people from last year had moved on, so there was nobody that had also stayed for a second year. So I always was going to have the upper hand at the start of the season, but I didn't expect it to carry on for the whole year, with that convincingly anyway. Uh, but yeah, I think that was what gave me the opportunity in F4 in the end. I picked up some really strong results, and I think Steve Hunter at JHR, he saw that I could be all right, so he gave us an email and said, look, we want to get you in the sim, and try and get you in the sim, see how quick you are, and then I think I hopped on their sim and set a lap record on there straight away, and they straight away wanted to get me in the real car. So yeah, I think I impressed JHR with the results that year, and therefore that's what gave me the opportunity for Formula 4.
Whoa, whoa, whoa. Before we go any further, I have to tell you about Mode Push racing gloves. Karting or sim racing, these gloves are ideal. Expertly designed to provide the driver with optimal comfort and grip. Tested and developed by a professional racing driver means that these products are held to the highest standard. External seams ensure the maximum comfort and fit, vented mesh panels along the inside of the fingers, and air-layered fabric ensure unmatched airflow and breathability. The palm is made from a tactile leather featuring silicone grips and index finger smartphone touch capability. When you're wearing these gloves, you'll only have one mode, and that's Mode Push. Go to the link in the description and use code BEHINDTHEWHEEL for 10% off your purchase. And now, on to the rest of the episode.
I know there's obviously there's going to be a very big difference between a very professional simulator like somewhere like JHR and obviously a home sim, but are there any similarities with those two?
As in between my home sim and
Yeah,
JHR sim.
yeah.
Um, well, obviously it's all the same kind of simulations in a way. We actually use iRacing in the home sims and at JHR, and that's purely because iRacing is pretty realistic. It's the closest you can get really. That's on the market at the moment, and plus iRacing is it's very unforgiving with a lot of things. So if you make a mistake, you're then going to struggle for the next three corners just because of how the physics are and stuff like that. So we try and aim everything around self improvement instead of just feeling like you're driving the real car. So sometimes it being perfectly realistic is not actually the best thing in a sim, and it sounds really weird to say. But yeah, sometimes if you were to exaggerate a problem that you might have in the real car, then you know how to deal with it when it happens. So that's what I've always done on my sim. I'll hop on it if I'm not trying to crash into my own friends or something on there. I'll hop into my own session. Just try and set some laps, and sometimes I'll make it harder for myself just to make sure that I can then prove to myself that I can do it.
I actually want to talk a little bit about sim racing because I've seen on your Instagram page you've posted the F1 game and stuff like that, and also you just said you do iRacing. Are there any other sim games or even just games at all that you do away from motorsport?
Um, Not really, if I'm honest. I'm quite boring in a way, in the fact that I only really focus on motorsport, and that's about it. So, it's all. I did a lot more on the Formula One game to start off with, but obviously it's not very realistic on there. So
Hmm.
I then moved to iRacing and started using that for actual sim prep and stuff like that. I then obviously upgraded my sim to make sure that it was up to the right standard that I needed to be able to learn. And from then on, any free time that I get when I'm not in the gym or something like that, I'll try and spend the time on my sim, and I'll try and use it to improve. And that's what you have to do in motorsport. You can't be sat there, not doing anything. You've got to be constantly trying to improve yourself and make sure that you're the best of the best.
And actually, going through to 2021, as you said, talked about JHR, you now step into your first season in Formula Cars with JHR. Again, how was that the transition from Fiesta to a full-on Formula car?
Um, it was definitely very tricky. There was a lot of traits that I picked up which worked really well in Fiestas that just did not work in F4, and it took me probably the whole year to really try and iron them out. And obviously, that was the first time I'd actually had to adapt my driving style before, because obviously Fiestas it just came naturally, and then once I taught myself to drive that way, I then had to try and figure out a completely different way with single seaters. So it was so tricky to try and get used to it, especially when I had three teammates that were unbelievably quick for the whole year. Obviously, Matt Rees ended up being champion, so you can imagine how demoralising it was when I'd come in P4 and I've done a pretty decent lap, and my teammates are P1, 2, and 3. So yeah, it was definitely very tricky that year to learn, but I was in a good place. I had a lot of good people around me, and I had a lot of good teammates to learn off, and I could use their data and video, things like that, and I could try and learn from them. And what I did over the last 2 years in F4 was I'd try and take the best from what they do, and then try and combine it with the best that I do, and try and put my twist on it. And therefore, I think that's why we've started off so strong this year.
Yeah, and that year you drove against some pretty like very talented drivers like Abby Pulling, Matthew Rees, like you just said, Oliver Gray. Like those guys, how was it to drive against them?
Um, yeah, obviously at the time we all were very, very low in terms of the single seater ladder. So, at the time we didn't realise that we were racing against each other that could go on to much bigger things. Obviously, you mentioned Ollie Gray's obviously moved up to Formula 3, things like that. So, we're all going our separate paths now, but we didn't know that at the time. So, we just saw each other as competition, and we wanted to beat each other every time we went out. And yeah, I don't think it was any different to that, really. It was just every time we got out in the car, we wanted to beat each other, and that's why we all improve at such a rapid rate in these single seater junior categories.
Yeah, actually, I want to say because uh, I remember someone like Alex Albon was saying that like especially through junior formulas that you see people from like previous categories or like karting or something like that with like George Russell with him and stuff like that. Is there anyone that you've like raced before that you race against now?
Um, I mean, Matt Rees obviously is my teammate this year, and he was my teammate in 2021 as well. So, but I'd probably say that's the longest, the longest kind of the longest friendship I have in motorsport. I'd guess. Yeah. Everyone else that I've raced against has either gone from Fiesta to kind of Ginettas or stuff like that, or they've not really progressed from where they were. So yeah, I haven't really. Yeah, that's actually a weird question. I've not been asked that one before. But no, I don't think I've really stayed. No, I don't know what more to say.
We asked the hard hitting questions here at Behind the Wheel. But yeah, moving on to 2022. Obviously, you go for another year in Formula 4, again with JHR. But this time you grab 4 wins and 9 podiums this year. And obviously, big improvement. Well, not, yeah, big improvement. Did that catch the eye of anyone else within motorsport?
Um, I don't think anything really from last year caught anyone's eye, purely because of how weak of a year we had at the start. So the first half, I don't know how many podiums we picked up, but it can't have been more than two. And then at round 6, we were just struggling really as a team. We're definitely one of the lower budget teams, and therefore it is hard when there's a full new car being brought into a championship. It's very hard to be able to compete with the likes of Carly and High Tech, things like that. So, we did our utmost, and by the end of the year, we were on pace. And I think it shows that we never lacked. I never lacked pace in myself, and I think the team did everything that they could with what they had, and that was that. But yeah, so it took us half the year to be able to get to pace to the point that we could win races. Then at Knockhill, I managed to put in a really good qualified P2, and then yeah, we won a race and ended up P3, and then from then on, the pace was just really strong for the rest of the year. And I think I might be wrong, but I think we scored the most points from anyone in the second half of the year. So, that shows that there was a lot more potential there, but it just wasn't our year, and that was that. But yeah, we picked up a few wins, and I can be pretty happy with the second half of that year.
Yeah, and especially to beat people like I remember Alex Dunn was there, again like Ollie Gray. To beat those guys, like what did it take to beat those guys?
It took a car and a driver that both worked in unison, as well as they needed to. Really, it was very tricky to obviously beat Alex. He had himself and the car very dialed in from round one, and that's why he dominated. That car was basically pinpoint for what he needed, and he knew exactly how to drive it because of how many hours he'd had in the car before it, and that's why um, that's why he dominated. And all respect to him, he did a really good job that year, and I want to try and do that this year. So yeah, I'm glad that people like Alex were on the grid because it tries to push me harder, and it really motivates me to make sure that I don't get beaten by him twice. So yeah, it's very tricky to beat them. We tried the whole year to try and beat them all, and we only did it 4 times. So it shows that it was a very good grid that last year, and yeah, it was definitely very difficult.
And then, like you said, now you're racing him this year, and obviously now this year you're in GB3, British Formula 3. But this time you, in one round, there's 3 races, and you absolutely blitz the field, getting 2 wins out of 3 races. I mean, is that the perfect start, or what is it?
Uh, well, it's definitely a good start. Obviously, it is only first round, so we need to keep a level head. It's not going to be that easy for the rest of the year. But obviously, to pick up a win and a podium was definitely what we wanted to start the year, and I'm pretty sure it caught a couple of eyes across motorsport. So hopefully we can carry on that form and see what happens for the rest of the year. And I think it's safe to say that if we do carry on this sort of form, then we can definitely expect to be fighting for the championship by the end of the year. And um, that's obviously our goal at the end of the day. We want to be at the front of the field, and we want to be fighting for championships. And whichever grid that is that I'm on, I'll always try and do that. There's only ever one goal in motorsport, and it's to win.
And also, obviously, there's not out the surface, like visually, there's not like a huge difference between Formula 4 cars and Formula 3 cars, but obviously you're the one driving it. So, is there a massive difference between how the car drives, or are they very similar?
There's a big difference. The F4 car, the way to be quicker in the F4 car was to, just push all out and just absolutely throw as much speed into a corner as possible, and hope you don't run out of room on the exit. Whereas this car, it's all about carrying speed through the corners, which definitely suits me more, and I think that's why I've gelled with this car really well. And it's nice to see that I can be so adaptable, and I can I can be able to change from one car to another so quickly. And I think that's also a skill that is always going to help me in any form of racing that I do.
And obviously, you got on your debut, you got a pole and a win, I believe. How is that to just literally immediately go and take a win?
Well, obviously I wasn't expecting to be on pole. That's for sure. It was my first weekend in the championship, and I didn't know what to expect. And I was racing against someone uh, called Matt Reese, which I might have mentioned a few times. Um, and unfortunately, he's very good. So I didn't expect to be out qualifying him, especially when obviously he'd basically completely outperformed me the last time I'd been on the same grid as him. So I did the best I could, but I didn't expect it to be pole. And at the end of the day, that was what I got. So um, yeah, just over the moon with how that weekend went. But obviously, it's only the first round, so we need to keep that form up and make sure that we keep improving, like everyone else will do, and make sure that we stay at the front.
Yeah, and obviously, like, to, I don't really know how to say this, but to basically transition into that, um, what was basically, how was it harder to adapt to the Formula 3 car than the Formula 4 car?
I think it was harder to adapt to the F4 car than the GB3 car, purely because I'd come from Fiestas, and it was such a change for me. You know, I went from a tin top with front wheel drive to a single seater with rear wheel drive, and it was unbelievable how different I had to drive those cars. And it's actually quite funny. I reckon if I was to hop back in a Fiesta, I'd actually struggle to go quicker, purely because of how my driving style's changed. And um, and yeah, it's just kind of that progression in motorsport that you always get used to your machinery. So the F4 was a very tricky car to get used to, but only because of where I'd been before. And obviously GB3, I'd been set up really nicely with F4. You know, the car was changing its balance every weekend in F4, and I had to learn to be able to just drive the car to its maximum and not really think about the balance at all, and just do the best I could. And that's where the adaptability part comes in, and it's definitely improved this year. And I think that's why we started off with a winning way.
And now, obviously, you're now going in, I believe, a week. Well, at the time of filming this, at least, I don't really know when this will be released, but at the time of filming this, there's a few more days until you head off to Silverstone, for the next round, I believe. If I'm getting that correctly. Um,
Yeah.
what's the plan, basically?
Yeah. So obviously we'll turn up on the Wednesday. I've got some simulator prep tomorrow on the Tuesday. Um, but yeah, on the Wednesday we'll go to Silverstone, do a track walk, and then we'll be on track Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So be a full on weekend, but hopefully we'll um, be able to pick up some more silverware.
Well, that's all I have from you today. Thank you so much, Joseph, for coming on the show. I know whatever you go next, I know we'll all be rooting for you. So thank you so much for coming on the show. And of course, everyone, you guys can find whatever Joseph, all his social media is going to be in the description below. Thank you so much for joining us today.
What an episode. Thank you so much to Joseph, and good luck for the rest of the season, man. I hope you have a lot of success. Well, another episode of Behind the Wheel is wrapped up. Join us back in around 3 weeks for the next episode, and you might see a special Kiwi guest. I'll see you all later. Bye-bye.